Next up, the Encore Boston Harbor Casino is in new hands. Well, sort of. Wynn Resorts announced a $1.7 billion sale of the Everett property to real estate investment trust Realty Income. That happened this week. But as the deal stipulates, Wynn will lease the property from Realty Income, starting at an annual rate of $100 million. They plan to use the proceeds from the sale to fund development plans across the street from the casino. Those plans include a 2,000-plus car garage, a nearly 1,000-seat events venue, and a 20,000-square-foot restaurant space, all to be connected to the casino via a footbridge over Broadway. Of course, that's all at the will of the State Gaming Commission. Well, joining me to discuss what this means for the future of the casino are Jon Chesto, reporter with the Boston Globe, and Paul DeBole, political science professor at Lasell University. Welcome to both of you. I can't tell you how excited I am to talk about this, so thanks for joining us.
Sure thing.
Jon, I want to jump in with you first. Can you explain to me and our viewers what's happening here?
So it's a fairly routine, at least in the casino industry, transaction called a sale-leaseback, where the company sells the real estate, that would be the land and the building, but stays in and pays rent to a new landlord. And so that's what Wynn Resorts is doing. They're obviously not going to leave. They're going to run the casino, but they've decided it makes more sense to get this cash up front. When the deal closes, it's not going to close until the end of the year, but they're going to get $1.7 billion. It's a lot of money. Rather than, and then they can retire debt. You know, they're paying essentially a mortgage on the property that they don't have to worry about anymore. They're going to have to pay rent of $100 million a year, but they must have done the numbers and realized, well, that's easier than trying to make the numbers work on this mortgage. So that's what they're doing, and they will get some money that they can then use. They're expanding. They're looking at a project in the United Arab Emirates that they need some money for, and as you mentioned, they're looking to build across the street. They're right now before the Gaming Commission with a theater, garage, restaurant space proposal and a footbridge to connect it all to the casino over Broadway. So they have expansion plans, and they need the cash to pull those off.
Jon, would this be shocking to people who were involved in the process of both from the cities and towns and the argument over wherever it was and where Boston was and everything that went on? You know, I'm reading the comments in your story at the Boston Globe today, and some people were like, well, that's what they really wanted to do all along. But it sounds like to me now that this is just sort of a financial move for them to free up cash rather than maybe going to a bank and getting a loan. So
yeah, that's sort of what's going on. It's not like they're leaving town.
Right.
I think they might have had, they certainly have spent more building this than they expected to. It was that they spent $2.6 billion to develop this project. And so, the mortgages, the debt that's on the property is, they probably are eager to retire and start spending money on something else. I mean, of course, they didn't anticipate the pandemic, and now they're doing pretty well, but they really struggled before the pandemic, particularly with slot machines. I think they figured out the slot machine formula to attract more slots players. And now in the last few months, with the exception of January, but January is a slow month for a lot of reasons, they've sort of got their footing back again. So I don't think it'd be a shock. We've seen a lot of casino companies do it. MGM did it out in Springfield. They basically have they're sort of an affiliated MGM Growth Properties, which is a real estate company that MGM often sells their casinos to and then leases back.
Paul, what's the temperature of the casinos in the state of Massachusetts? Jon was alluding to it. You know, we're looking at data during a pandemic, and I think the most recent sort of reports I looked said they were optimistic, and clearly they're optimistic because they're doing a deal like this. How are the casinos doing against what they expected to do, and how does that look for the tax revenue for the state?
So the numbers seem to mirror, at least in terms of pattern, the revenue numbers from January of 2020, December, November 2019, with minor fluctuations because of but I mean, I believe there is cause to be optimistic. But the big problem that we have is a lack of concrete long-term data to base it.
Jon, I want to talk about this bridge that they want to run from their proposal across the street. And, we're talking about Broadway, so I don't know if it's Everett or Boston.
It's actually all Everett.
All Everett. So it's
yeah.
an Everett situation. And I'm always, I was joking with the producers before this that I could talk for days about public bridges being built over public roadways by private companies. All kidding aside, is there anything that you see that would be a stumbling block for the Gaming Commission to approve this? I mean, it sounds delightful to have a big venue and more parking and all that, but it's not just going to be all smooth sailing, is it?
Well, what happened was that Wynn originally said they wanted an 1,800 seat theater in that property across the street that would be connected by a walkway, and they said. They were very well aware that the casino law does not allow theaters between the size of 1,000 seats and 3,500 seats. But they said that doesn't count because this is a separate property across the street. However, the Gaming Commission is looking at it very closely. And I think Wynn is reading the tea leaves and said, well, you know what? We're just going to play it safe. And we're going to propose a 999 seat theater to stay within under the 1,000 seat threshold. So what Wynn would love it if the Gaming Commission says that that property across the street is technically not part of the casino, not to be regulated as part of the casino. That way they can go back to the 1,800 seat proposal. But so that's really what hangs in the balance is, will the Gaming Commission decide it's going to regulate the property across the street as essentially part of the casino site? And if it does, then this casino, the law that says you can't have any theaters in a casino with more than 1,000 seats, which was put in to protect the incumbent theaters across the state who didn't want to be blindsided by casinos, which can essentially subsidize performers. So that's really, I mean, Wynn does not want to be regulated. They do not want that property to be regulated as part of the casino. And the Gaming Commission is deciding whether or not to consider it technically part of the casino. And you could argue, well, it's connected by a enclosed walkway. So even if it is technically a separate parcel and across the street, it's still essentially an arm of the casino building. So that's what's kind of playing out here at the Gaming Commission. And, that's the uncertainty. If the Wynn does not want it, and I can tell you that the theater owners would much, there are many rival theaters that are watching this closely, and they would much prefer a 999 seat theater there than an 1,800 seat theater.
Yeah, and to underscore your point for folks, casinos can generally have performers as loss leaders and pay them a lot.
They can. There are all sorts of things they can do. They can buy blocks of tickets. They can offer a much bigger price, to the artist. And if you're an independent theater competing against a casino, and you talk to these folks about what Foxwood and Mohegan Sun have done to them, it's been a tough competition. And
I imagine they can also make the argument that we don't own the property that the casino's on. We own the property that the theater's on, so therefore it's a separate entity connected what may end up being a quasi-public
I mean, it'd be
footprint.
interesting to see how this leaseback just became public, so it's not necessarily being introduced into the Gaming Commission debate, but it'd be interesting to see how it does get introduced, like how it plays out.
Paul, what's the gaming world feel about we haven't got our gambling yet here in Massachusetts, and I keep meeting people who keep riding to other states around us so that they can gamble on their sports, the DraftKings of the world. Is there any concern from these brick and mortar places that the gambling we're in the middle of a sort of a culture shift or beginning of a culture shift where people won't be going to casinos as much once we start reemerging again as the pandemic subdues a little bit?
I think they're looking at online gambling, with a cautious eye. They're looking at Twin Rivers. They're looking at New Hampshire. I talk to people all the time where they get in the car on a Sunday, drive up to New Hampshire, bet on a couple of games, and watch the games. Is there a lost opportunity here in Massachusetts? Absolutely. But the question is, how do we regulate that? And how does the company tax that? We're seeing a big disparity in DraftKings versus brick and mortar casinos. And I think that's something that the legislature is going to have to deal with at some point. But again, they have legislature does have a tough job. They have to become experts in everything. And whatever they regulate in one area is usually the law of unintended consequences. So they tend to be a little more deliberate in that way, and try to blunt or limit the effects of unintended consequences. And if it takes a little longer for them to do it, so be it. It's better to do it right than do it right.
Jon, are you hearing, there's all these other casino developments and issues that are still in play across the state, everywhere from Martha's Vineyard to, western part of Massachusetts. Is there a feeling that there's actually a marketplace for this, that there are enough customers to make all of this worthwhile? I'm not so worried about Wynn, but there are some other smaller casinos and certainly the Native American tribes that are looking for licensing.
I think the most likely, we've seen sort of a resurgence of interest from in the Mashpee Wampanoag project in Taunton, and the Aquina Wampanoag also, they want to build a casino. They're working on a sort of what would be a bingo hall there in Aquina. I think Aquina, being on sort of a remote part of Martha's Vineyard, does not have a lot of appeal to a casino developer, but there's a lot of money behind the Mashpee Wampanoags from Genting, which is this global casino developer. So, the sort of the Trump administration was not keen on allowing them there. I think the tide has turned a bit for them, and the Biden administration seems more open to allowing a casino in Taunton. So I think we might very well see them. They've spent a lot of money and time trying to build that. We might see that still come to fruition. The only other place where we might see a development is in Brockton, but I think as long as Taunton remains in play, the two cities are too close. No one's going to try to compete with a tribal casino in Taunton. I do feel like we're at the point where it's pretty saturated. I mean, you can see the numbers. Every time a new casino opens in New England, everyone else's numbers take a hit a bit. I don't know how much more room there is for another one.
Of course, the issue there, of course, was with the federal recognition of the tribe. Jon Chesto, I appreciate you joining us with your expertise, and Paul DeBole as well. Thank you so much. I look forward to you updating me on this footbridge, which, of course, is the big hook for me on this story. Thanks so much for joining me.